Jonathan Parker stood in his opulent office, the epitome of success and wealth. The walls were lined with framed awards, photographs capturing moments of triumph, and memorabilia that spoke of a relentless ambition. His gaze drifted toward the expansive skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows, where the city sparkled like a treasure chest beneath the setting sun. But despite the luxurious surroundings, a hint of dissatisfaction clouded his expression. His eyes fell on a family photo resting on his desk, featuring his wife Emily, her smile radiant and genuine. For a fleeting moment, he recalled the early days of their relationship, the laughter, the struggles, and the undeniable bond they shared. But that moment was quickly eclipsed by the weight of his current reality, and a frown creased his brow. Jonathan's thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of his phone. He picked it up, glancing at the screen to see a message from Sophia, his stunning mistress. A smile tugged at his lips, intoxicating him with the promise of glamour and excitement. He couldn't help but feel a surge of pride at the thought of her by his side during the upcoming investor meeting. After all, she embodied everything he desired in that moment: beauty, sophistication, and an aura of exclusivity. He felt a twinge of guilt as he thought of Emily, but he quickly pushed it aside, convincing himself that Emily's modest background was a liability he could no longer afford. Meanwhile, at their home, Emily was busy in the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner that filled the air with a warm, inviting aroma. She hummed softly to herself, recalling the early days of their relationship when they would cook together, sharing stories and dreams over simmering pots and sizzling pans. She remembered the times they had little more than each other, but their love had felt infinite. The laughter, the late-night talks, and the plans they made together were treasures she held dear, even as they navigated the complexities of their lives now. As she set the table, her heart fluttered with anticipation. She wanted the evening to be special, to remind Jonathan of the love they once shared. When he finally arrived, the door swung open with a familiar creak, and she turned to greet him with a warm smile. "Jonathan, I made your favorite, chicken Alfredo," Emily called out, her voice bright with enthusiasm. Jonathan stepped inside, his tailored suit sharp against the cozy backdrop of their home. He surveyed the scene, his expression shifting from mild surprise to disinterest. "Oh, that's nice, he replied, his voice lacking the warmth she craved. He walked past her toward the living room, barely acknowledging her presence. Emily's smile faltered as she followed him, her heart sinking slightly. "How was your day?" she asked, trying to engage him. "It was fine," he said dismissively, his gaze drifting to the latest fashion magazine sprawled across the coffee table. "You wouldn't believe the trends this season. Everyone is talking about bold colors and sleek lines. It's all about the image, you know." Emily's brow furrowed as she processed his words. "Oh, really? I've seen some beautiful dresses lately," she ventured, hoping to share in his enthusiasm. Jonathan waved a dismissive hand, his tone condescending. "Emily, it's not about dresses. It's about being relevant. You should really consider updating your wardrobe. You know, it's about perception." She felt a sting at his words, her heart sinking further. "I thought you liked my style," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. He shrugged, his attention now fully captured by the magazine. "It's not that I don't like it, but—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Maybe it's time to step it up a bit." Emily's chest tightened, the familiar insecurities creeping in. "I'll keep that in mind," she said softly, forcing a smile. She turned away, feeling the sting of his words like a cold slap. As she resumed her cooking, thoughts of their past flooded her mind, the dreams they had shared, the laughter that once filled their home. But now, The warmth seemed to have faded, replaced by a growing distance she couldn't quite comprehend. Meanwhile, Jonathan found himself in a whirlwind of thoughts, battling the internal conflict between his affection for Emily and the allure of Sophia. He had met Sophia at a charity gala, her elegance and charm captivating him instantly. She was everything he admired, the embodiment of the glamorous lifestyle he craved. As he prepared for the meeting with the foreign investors, the notion of bringing Sophia along felt like a stroke of genius. He wanted to impress them, to show them that he was a man of taste and sophistication. Later that evening, in a sleek downtown cafe, Jonathan sat across from Sophia, captivated by her beauty as she sipped her drink. Her long hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her eyes sparkled with mischief. He leaned forward, excitement bubbling within him. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice low and conspiratorial. "The investor meeting is coming up, and I want to bring you with me." Sophia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, you mean I get to meet your illustrious investors?" "Yes. Imagine their faces when they see you. You'll steal the show," Jonathan said, his confidence surging. "I want them to know I'm not just a businessman. I'm a man of distinction." She smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. "I'd love to, Jonathan. But what about Emily? Won't she be upset?" Jonathan waved his hand dismissively, brushing aside any concern for his wife. "Emily doesn't have to come. This is about making an impression. I want to show them that I'm moving up in the world, and having you by my side will do just that." Sophia tilted her head, her lips curling into a playful grin. "You're quite the strategist, aren't you? But, keeping her out of the picture might have its consequences." Jonathan leaned back, a self-assured smile on his face. "I can handle it. Emily doesn't understand the game we're playing. She's too comfortable with the past. I need to show everyone who I've become." As he spoke, Jonathan felt a rush of excitement, convincing himself that he was making the right choice. He gazed at Sophia, absorbed in her beauty and charm, allowing himself to be swept away by the fantasy of a life without the burdens of his past. But deep down, a nagging voice whispered that he was crossing a line, one that could lead to unforeseen consequences. Back in their home, Emily finished setting the table, her heart heavy but still hopeful. She had planned a simple yet heartfelt evening, one that she hoped would bridge the growing chasm between them. As she lit the candles, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. A part of her sensed the distance in Jonathan's demeanor, the way his eyes lit up when he spoke of the business world, but dimmed when he regarded their life together. In that moment, as she stood before the flickering candlelight, Emily made a silent promise to herself. She would not let their love fade away without a fight. She would reach out, remind him of the bond they once shared, and try to draw him back from the edge he seemed to be teetering on. Little did she know, the choices they were both making would soon lead to an unforeseen confrontation, testing the very foundations of their relationship. The day of the investor meeting arrived, and the air in Jonathan Parker's office buzzed with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, adjusting his tie as he admired the sprawling skyline of the city. It was a view he had grown accustomed to, yet today felt different. Today, he was not just any billionaire. He was a man on the verge of securing a monumental deal that would elevate his company to new heights. Beside him stood Sophia, a strikingly beautiful woman with a confidence that radiated from her every move. She was dressed in a form-fitting, shimmering gown that accentuated her curves perfectly, and Jonathan couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as he glanced at her. This was the image he wanted to present to the investors: glamour, allure, and success. "Are you ready for this?" Sophia asked, her voice smooth like silk. She twirled a lock of hair around her finger, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. More than ready, Jonathan replied, forcing a smile. Deep down, however, a knot of tension twisted in his stomach. He had meticulously planned every detail of this meeting, but now, standing so close to the moment of truth, doubt crept in. What if they didn't take him seriously? What if they found out about Emily, about the humble beginnings that Jonathan had tried so desperately to escape? As they made their way to the conference room, the sound of murmurs and laughter echoed through the halls. Investors, dressed in bespoke suits and high-end attire, gathered in small groups, their faces lit with expectation. Jonathan felt a rush of adrenaline as he entered the room. He was greeted with nods of acknowledgement and murmurs of admiration. He could feel their eyes on Sophia, and for a moment, he reveled in the attention. "Look at you," Jonathan said, leaning slightly closer to Sophia as they approached the long mahogany table where the investors were seated. "You're going to make an impression. Just don't forget who's really pulling the strings here," she replied with a wink, her tone playful yet laced with an underlying seriousness. The comment sent a flicker of unease through Jonathan, but he brushed it aside as he took his seat at the head of the table. As the presentation began, Jonathan's confidence swelled. He spoke passionately about his company's vision, the innovations they were bringing to the market, and the potential for substantial returns on investment. But amidst the numbers and projections, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He glanced at Marcus, a seasoned businessman known for his sharp intuition and unyielding standards. Marcus sat back in his chair, his arms crossed, observing both Jonathan and Sophia with a keen gaze. Jonathan's heart raced as he noticed the subtle way Marcus's eyes shifted between them. There was an intensity in Marcus's expression, as if he were piecing together a puzzle. Jonathan's mind raced. Was there a connection between Marcus and Sophia that he was unaware of? He shook the thought away, focusing instead on the presentation, but the nagging sense of unease persisted. As the meeting progressed, Jonathan caught snippets of conversation from the investors. They were impressed by the visuals, captivated by the numbers, but there was an undercurrent of skepticism that Jonathan could feel in the air. He glanced at Sophia, who was leaning back in her chair, an air of nonchalance surrounding her. He wanted her to be engaged, to feed off his energy, but she seemed lost in her own thoughts. "Is everything okay?" Jonathan whispered to her, his voice barely above a murmur. "Of course, darling. Just thinking about how we're going to celebrate after this," she replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Jonathan nodded, forcing down the unease that bubbled within him. He continued his pitch, his voice gaining momentum as he discussed potential partnerships and future expansions. Yet, every time he stole a glance at Marcus, he felt the weight of scrutiny pressing down on him. Then came the break. Jonathan stood up, stretching his legs and trying to shake off the tension that had settled in his shoulders. He watched as the investors broke into small groups, discussing the presentation. He felt a sense of relief wash over him, believing that perhaps he had managed to impress them after all. But then he overheard a conversation that sent a chill down his spine. "Can you believe how far he's come?" Marcus's voice carried over the buzz of chatter. "And yet, it's fascinating to see how he's chosen to present himself." Sophia's laughter rang out, melodic yet hollow. "It's all for show, Marcus. You know that. He's trying to impress you." Jonathan's heart dropped. He turned slightly, pretending to engage in a discussion with another investor while eavesdropping on their exchange. "Still, it's surprising to see you here with him," Marcus continued. "I didn't think you'd be involved in this kind of venture anymore." "Oh, I have my reasons," Sophia replied, her tone light but with a hint of something deeper. Let's just say I'm curious about his success. As panic surged through Jonathan, he felt the ground beneath him shift. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Had Sophia and Marcus shared a past? The thought ignited a fire of jealousy and insecurity within him. He had brought Sophia here to showcase his success, but now it felt like he was merely a pawn in a game he didn't understand. He stepped away from the group, his mind racing. Seeking solace, he approached the refreshment table, pouring himself a glass of water, his hands trembling slightly. He could feel the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. Had he made a grave mistake by choosing Sophia over Emily? The thought of Emily, with her unwavering support and genuine love, flooded his mind. He felt a pang of guilt, realizing that he had hidden her away, believing that her modest background would diminish his stature among the elite. Jonathan. Sophia's voice sliced through his thoughts as she approached him, her expression a mix of concern and amusement. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Did you and Marcus? He hesitated, uncertainty clawing at him. Do you know him well? Sophia waved her hand dismissively, a flirtatious smile playing on her lips. Oh, please, we've crossed paths a few times. It was nothing significant. You're the one I'm here for. Jonathan searched her eyes, hoping to find reassurance. I just need you to focus. This is important. Relax, she purred, leaning closer, her voice silky. Everything is under control. Just trust me. But as he stared into her confident gaze, doubt gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything was unraveling. The very foundation of his carefully constructed world seemed to be cracking, and in that moment, he understood that he was teetering on the edge of a precipice. The stakes had never been higher, and the choices he had made were about to come back to haunt him. As the presentation resumed, Jonathan Parker stood at the head of the long conference table, trying desperately to regain his composure. The room was filled with high-powered investors, their eyes darting between him and Sophia, who was perched elegantly at his side. He could feel the tension thickening in the air, particularly directed at Sophia. The way she had laughed and leaned into Marcus during the break still gnawed at him, each chuckle echoing in his mind like a taunt. Jonathan brushed a hand across his forehead, wiping away the sweat that threatened to betray his unease. Let's pivot to our projected growth for the next quarter, Jonathan announced, his voice slightly strained. He forced a smile, attempting to project confidence. As you can see from the charts, we anticipate a substantial increase in revenue. Jonathan, Marcus interrupted, his tone casual yet sharp. May I ask how you plan to achieve that growth? Your last report didn't quite reflect those expectations. Jonathan swallowed hard. Well, we have several strategies in place, including expanding our product line and... Are you suggesting that the previous strategies were ineffective? Marcus leaned back in his chair, folding his arms, his gaze piercing, as if he were dissecting Jonathan piece by piece. Sophia, sensing the rising tension, cleared her throat. I believe Jonathan has a solid plan, Marcus. We've all seen the numbers. It's all about execution, right? She smiled, but it felt forced, almost as if she were trying to maintain a facade that was beginning to crack. Jonathan shot her a glance, appreciating her attempt to intervene, but feeling the weight of the situation press down on him. He needed to steer the conversation back on course. Yes, execution is key, and we have a dedicated team that is focused on delivering results. With each passing moment, Jonathan could feel the atmosphere grow heavier. The investors exchanged glances, murmurs rippling through the room as they sensed the discord between him and Marcus. He felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't anticipated. Meanwhile, outside the sleek glass doors of the conference room, Emily stood at the entrance, her heart racing. She had sensed Jonathan's distress, a feeling that had gnawed at her all morning. The carefully curated facade of glamour and success seemed to mask something deeper, a fracture in their world. She hesitated, wondering if she should enter. The weight of her modest background clashed with the opulence that surrounded her, but her instincts urged her forward. Taking a deep breath, Emily opened the door, just as Jonathan was gesturing emphatically at a chart projected on the wall. The sudden sound of the door creaking open drew the attention of everyone in the room. Jonathan's gaze snapped to her, his eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and dread. "Emily," he blurted, his voice rising slightly. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see how things were going," she replied, her voice steady despite the anxiety coiling in her stomach. She stepped into the room, feeling the weight of the investors' curious stares. "Now is not the best time," Jonathan said, trying to maintain his composure. He glanced at Sophia, who had gone pale, her confident demeanor faltering as she regarded the unexpected intruder. "I think it's exactly the right time," Emily asserted, her gaze shifting to Marcus, who wore a knowing smile. "I'm here to support my husband." Marcus spoke up, his tone warm yet probing. "It's a pleasure to finally meet the woman behind the man. Isn't that right, Jonathan?" Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Yes, well, this is a business meeting." "Business is often about relationships, Jonathan," Marcus interjected smoothly. "And it seems your wife is here to strengthen that connection." Emily felt a flicker of pride at Marcus's words, but quickly masked it with uncertainty. She approached the table, her presence a stark contrast to the polished veneer of the room. "I believe in Jonathan's vision. I've seen him build this company from the ground up, and I know what he's capable of when he's driven." The investors exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement. Jonathan's heart raced, not just from the surprise of Emily's entrance, but also from the realization that her sincerity held a power he had long underestimated. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat, trapped beneath layers of his own pride and anxiety. "Jonathan," Emily continued, her voice unwavering, "if there's something you're worried about, you should share it. Transparency is key in business and in marriage." Sophia shifted in her seat, her earlier confidence dissolving into discomfort. "Emily, I think you might be misunderstanding the context here. Jonathan and I we were discussing our strategies." Jonathan cut in, his tone sharper than he intended. He cast a glance at Sophia, who looked taken aback. "But I appreciate your input, Emily. It's always valuable." Marcus leaned forward, an amused expression crossing his face. "It appears there's more to this meeting than just numbers." "I'm intrigued." Jonathan's stomach churned. He could feel the walls closing in, the weight of his choices pressing down on him like an anchor. Emily's presence, meant to offer support, felt like a spotlight illuminating every flaw in his carefully constructed facade. He had hidden her away, believing he could impress the investors with glamour instead of authenticity, but the reality was far more complicated. As the discussion resumed, Jonathan found it increasingly challenging to focus. He could feel Marcus's gaze flickering between him and Emily, a knowing look that made Jonathan feel exposed. He knew that Marcus was reading the tension between them, and it terrified him. The meeting progressed, but Jonathan's thoughts began to drift. He couldn't shake the image of Emily standing there, embodying the very strength and loyalty he had once admired but had now sought to distance himself from. She was more than just his wife. She was the anchor he had needed, and in his quest for approval, he had overlooked that. Outside, the hallway buzzed with activity as employees and investors mingled. Emily, after a moment of lingering uncertainty, stepped out into the corridor, her heart racing. She needed air, clarity, and perhaps a moment to collect her thoughts. Just then, she rounded a corner and came face to face with Marcus. The recognition in his eyes was immediate, and Emily felt an inexplicable connection. "You're Jonathan's wife," he said, a slight smile playing on his lips. "I've heard a lot about you. I hope it's all good," Emily replied, her tone light but cautious. Marcus chuckled, a genuine sound that seemed to break the tension. "Jonathan has always spoken highly of you. It's clear he admires your loyalty." "Loyalty is important," Emily said, her voice steady. "I just wish he could see that sometimes." Marcus nodded, his expression softening. "It can be hard for some to recognize what they have until it's too late. But you're here now, and that counts for something." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, an understanding passed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of the complexities of relationships and the sacrifices made in the name of ambition. Unbeknownst to Jonathan, his decisions were echoing in ways he could never have anticipated. As Emily turned to continue down the hallway, she felt Marcus's gaze lingering on her, a sense of respect blooming in the air. She was more than just Jonathan's wife. She was a person of substance, deserving of recognition and respect. And though she didn't know how this meeting would unfold, she felt a newfound resolve to stand firm in her truth. From a distance, Jonathan watched them, his heart pounding as anxiety gripped him. What had he done? The very fabric of his carefully curated life was beginning to unravel, and the consequences were far more significant than he had envisioned. He had underestimated Emily, and now it appeared that fate was aligning to teach him a lesson he desperately needed to learn. The atmosphere in the conference room thickened as Jonathan Parker's heart raced. He sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, his gaze flickering nervously between the investors and Sophia, who was attempting to maintain an air of nonchalance. Marcus, the seasoned businessman whose reputation for reading people was legendary, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a bemused smile gracing his lips. Jonathan could feel the weight of Marcus's scrutiny like a pair of heavy chains, and he squirmed under the pressure. Authenticity and loyalty go hand in hand in any successful venture, Marcus remarked, his voice smooth yet piercing. His gaze shifted to Jonathan, a challenge hidden beneath the surface. "Without those qualities, I fear we might be building on quicksand." Jonathan felt the color drain from his face as he absorbed the implications of those words. They were a subtle jab, a reminder of his own precarious choices. He had wanted to impress these investors, to dazzle them with glamour and charm. Yet here was Marcus, calling attention to the very lack of authenticity Jonathan had been trying to mask. The billionaire's facade threatened to crumble, and he could feel the walls closing in as doubts about his decisions crept into his mind. "Of course, Marcus," Jonathan replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "We all know that trust is the foundation of any relationship, both personal and professional." He hoped his words would deflect the conversation, but the tension in the room only escalated. The murmurs among the investors grew louder, and Jonathan's palms began to sweat. Sophia, sensing the shift in dynamics, reached over and placed a delicate hand on Jonathan's arm. "You're doing great," she whispered, her breath warm against his skin. Yet her reassurance felt insipid, a thin veneer over the chaos bubbling beneath the surface. Jonathan felt a rush of irritation. Was she truly supportive, or was she merely concerned about her own standing in this high-stakes game? As the presentation continued, Jonathan's thoughts spiraled. He could see Emily's image in his mind, her warm smile, and the way she had always believed in him, even in their most difficult days. Yet, he had chosen to overlook her loyalty, confining her to the shadows of his glitzy life. The irony weighed heavily on his conscience. He had sought validation from Sophia while betraying the very person who had built him up from nothing. Meanwhile, Emily stood just outside the conference room, feeling out of place and invisible. She had come to support her husband, but instead, she felt like an intruder in his world of power suits and polished shoes. Peering through the glass wall, she caught sight of Jonathan, his expression a mask of forced confidence. But the tension radiating from him was palpable, almost like a warning sign. She could see Marcus's eyes narrowing, and the sense of foreboding deepened within her. Suddenly, her ears caught a snippet of conversation drifting from inside the room. Jonathan's voice, laced with disdain, cut through the air like a knife. "She doesn't understand this world," he said, clearly referring to her. "Emily is simply not equipped for it." Hurt surged through Emily, sharp and unyielding. She had always known that Jonathan struggled with her humble beginnings, but hearing him speak so disparagingly, so dismissively, shattered her heart. The anger that followed was fierce. How could he forget the sacrifices they had made together? How could he belittle the very foundation of their relationship? Determined, she stepped back, considering her options. Confronting him during the meeting would only escalate the tension, but she knew she couldn't let his words go unchallenged. She needed to wait for the right moment, to confront him when the time was right, when the dust settled, and he could no longer hide behind his illusions. Back inside the conference room, the presentation reached a fever pitch. Jonathan, attempting to regain control, presented his projections and strategies with an intensity he didn't quite feel. But every time he glanced at Marcus, he saw the skepticism etched on the investor's face. It was as if Marcus could see through the layers of Jonathan's bravado, piercing the heart of his insecurities. "Let's talk about the numbers, shall we?" Marcus interrupted, leaning forward. "You claim impressive growth, yet I'm concerned about the sustainability of your model. What guarantees can you provide that this isn't just a flash in the pan?" Jonathan's mind raced. "We have solid plans in place," he stammered, trying to maintain composure. "Our team is working diligently to ensure that we meet all projections." He could feel Sophia's eyes on him, her expression shifting from support to apprehension. In that moment, he realized he was losing her confidence as well. Diligently, Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's a vague term. I need to see commitment, not just words." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Jonathan could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, and he wanted nothing more than to lash out, to defend his choices. "Look, we're not here to debate semantics," he snapped, his voice sharper than intended. "This is a lucrative opportunity for everyone involved." Marcus's expression remained unfazed. "Perhaps, but I'm not willing to gamble on someone who seems to have lost sight of their priorities." The pointed remark hung in the air, a gauntlet thrown down. Frustration bubbled within Jonathan, and he felt the urge to retaliate. "My priorities are perfectly clear," he asserted, his voice rising. "I'm building something significant here, and I won't let anyone undermine that." He glanced at Sophia, seeking her approval, but instead he found her looking away, her expression shifting from concern to disappointment. As the meeting dragged on, Jonathan sensed the investors growing restless. The energy in the room had shifted dramatically, and he could feel the fleeting grasp he had on the situation slipping away. He glanced around the table, noting the frowns and crossed arms, signs of discontent. Sophia's facade began to crack under the mounting pressure. "Jonathan, maybe we should take a step back," she suggested quietly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "This isn't going as planned." He turned to her, anger flaring. "What do you mean? We can't just back down now." He wanted to scream, to unleash the storm brewing inside him, but he kept it contained. The last thing he needed was to appear weak in front of the investors. But it was too late. The cracks had formed, and the tension had reached a boiling point. Jonathan felt isolated, trapped in a web of his own making. The glossy veneer he had constructed around his life began to shatter, piece by piece. In his pursuit of prestige, he had lost sight of the very values that had once defined him. Outside, Emily paced, her heart heavy with the weight of her husband's words. Could she really confront him after the meeting? Did she even want to? The anger coursing through her veins was matched only by the love she felt for the man she had married. She remembered their early days, the laughter, the dreams they had shared, and the promise of a future built together. "Jonathan, you need to wake up," she whispered to herself, the resolve growing stronger. She could no longer stand idly by while he floundered in a world that didn't align with who he truly was. The man she had loved was still inside him, buried beneath layers of arrogance and denial. And it was time for her to bring him back to the surface. As the meeting drew to a close, Jonathan felt a sense of impending doom. He had pushed too far, and now the consequences were closing in around him. With each passing moment, he could sense his dreams slipping away, and the realization that he might have lost everything, his business, his reputation, and even the connection with Emily, began to sink in. The room was thick with tension as he looked around at the investors, their expressions unreadable. He was aware that he had crossed a line, and the realization gnawed at him, relentless and unforgiving. He had wanted to impress them, but all he had done was alienate them and, worse, himself. The meeting room was a cacophony of disappointment, the murmurs of disgruntled investors echoing off the sleek, modern walls. Jonathan Parker stood at the head of the table, his heart racing as he watched the investors file out, their faces etched with disillusionment. Frustration clawed at him. He had envisioned this moment as a triumph, a chance to solidify his status among the elite. Instead, it felt like everything was crumbling around him. "Damn it, Sophia," he spat, turning to his glamorous mistress, who was still seated with a nonchalant air, flipping her perfectly manicured nails as if the chaos surrounding them was nothing more than an inconvenience. "What happened? You were supposed to be my secret weapon." Sophia leaned back in her chair, her expression a mix of amusement and irritation. "Jonathan, please. You seriously underestimated the situation. I was never interested in you. I came here for the connections, not for the charm of your little show," she replied, her voice dripping with disdain. "You've built a castle on a foundation of sand, and now it's collapsing." Jonathan's face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. "You played me. You knew what this meeting meant to me, and you didn't even try to help." He ran a hand through his hair, trying to regain control of the spiraling situation. Sophia stood up, her figure tall and imposing. "Help? You're the one who thought you could hide your real life away, like it was some shameful secret. You brought me here as a trophy, not as a partner. Don't you dare put this on me." With a dismissive toss of her hair, she began to walk away, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor. "Wait," Jonathan called out, desperation creeping into his voice. "What do I do now? This was my last chance to impress them." She paused, glancing over her shoulder with a smirk. "You should have thought about that before you decided to play pretend. I'm not your salvation, Jonathan." And with that, she was gone, leaving him standing alone in the now eerily quiet room. Jonathan's mind raced as he paced back and forth, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had wanted to impress the investors, to prove that he was worthy of their respect and their money. But instead, he had exposed his vulnerabilities and weaknesses. He had put his trust in the wrong person, and now it felt like everything he had built was hanging by a thread. The door swung open, and Emily stepped inside, her presence like a breath of fresh air amidst the chaos. The sight of her struck Jonathan like a bolt of lightning. She looked beautiful, even in her simple attire, her hair cascading in soft waves around her shoulders. But there was an intensity in her eyes that made his heart race for a different reason. "Jonathan," she said, her voice steady but laced with concern. "I need to talk to you." He opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. The last thing he wanted was to face her now, especially after everything that had just happened. "Emily, not now. I'm really not in the mood." "I don't care about your mood," she replied, stepping closer, her gaze unwavering. I saw what happened out there. You can't keep doing this, hiding me away like I'm some sort of embarrassment. Jonathan felt a pang of guilt, but quickly brushed it aside. That's not fair, Emily. You don't understand what's at stake. Then make me understand, she shot back, fire in her eyes. You treat me like I'm invisible, like I don't belong in your world. But I was here before all of this. She gestured around the room, encompassing the opulence and grandeur. I was here when you had nothing, when we were building our lives together. How can you forget that? I'm not forgetting anything, he snapped, his frustration boiling over. But this is different now. I have a reputation to uphold, and it doesn't include— He paused, searching for the right words. It doesn't include dragging you into this messy world. Emily's expression softened for just a moment, but then hardened again. Messy? Is that what you think of our life together? Because I see a man who is scared, Jonathan. Scared of where he came from, scared of what people think. But that shouldn't matter. I love you. I've always loved you, and I thought you loved me too. Jonathan felt the weight of her words pressing down on him, but he couldn't bring himself to admit the truth. This isn't about love. It's about business. It's about survival, he replied, his voice rising. And you wouldn't understand. Try me, Emily insisted, her voice unwavering. You think I don't know what it's like to struggle? You think I don't know what it's like to fight for every little thing? We've been through so much together, and now you're throwing it all away for— what? A fantasy. The tension between them grew thick, the air charged with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Jonathan felt cornered, trapped between his pride and the love he still held for Emily. But the fear of losing everything he worked for was suffocating. I don't have time for this, he finally said, turning away from her. I need to think. Think about what? She pressed, refusing to let him escape. About how to salvage your reputation, or about how to keep hiding me away. Because I won't stand for it anymore, Jonathan. I deserve better than this. He turned back to face her, his frustration boiling over. And what do you propose I do? Just walk into a room full of investors and say, "Hey, look at my wife. Isn't she charming?" What do you think they'll say? They'll laugh at me. Emily took a step closer, her eyes blazing. Maybe they'll laugh. Maybe they'll be impressed that you're not ashamed of where you came from. But you'll never know if you keep running away from it. You have to face them, Jonathan, and face yourself. You have to be honest. His heart raced as he processed her words, but doubts still lingered. And if I do that, what if they reject me? What if they see me as a failure? Then you'll know the truth, she replied softly. And you'll have me by your side, no matter what. But if you continue down this path, hiding in the shadows, you're going to lose everything, including me. Jonathan stood frozen, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. He felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by the reality of his situation. He had betrayed her trust and his own values in pursuit of wealth and status. Just as he was about to respond, the door swung open again, and Marcus stepped in, his expression unreadable. The atmosphere immediately shifted, tension filling the space once more. "Jonathan," Marcus said, his voice calm yet firm. "We need to talk." Jonathan felt his stomach drop. The last thing he wanted was another confrontation, especially not with the very man whose respect he had just lost. "What is it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I wanted to let you know that your actions today have consequences," Marcus stated, his gaze shifting between Jonathan and Emily. "Your betrayal has been noted. I don't think we can work together anymore." Jonathan's heart sank. The realization that he had lost Marcus's trust felt like a death knell. "You can't be serious. I can fix this, I just need—" Marcus raised a hand to stop him. "No, Jonathan. You need to reflect on your choices. You can't keep pretending that this life is just a game. People get hurt, and trust, once broken, is not easily mended." Jonathan felt the walls closing in around him. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "I'll make it right. Just give me another chance." Marcus shook his head, his expression hardening. "It's too late for that. You need to figure out what's truly important to you. Until then, I can't be part of your world." With that, Marcus turned and walked out, leaving Jonathan standing there, feeling more isolated than ever. He glanced back at Emily, who was watching him with a mixture of concern and disappointment. "Jonathan," she began, but he cut her off. "Don't," he said, his voice low and strained. "I don't want to hear it right now." "Then when will you want to hear it?" she pressed, her voice trembling slightly. "You're losing everything. You need to face the truth, Jonathan, before it's too late." He turned away, the weight of his decisions crashing over him like a tidal wave. In that moment, he realized that the opulence he had so desperately sought was nothing but a gilded cage, and the one person who had always believed in him was slipping away, leaving him to confront the emptiness he had created. As Jonathan Parker stood in the aftermath of the chaotic meeting, the weight of his decisions pressed heavily upon him. He could still hear the echoes of disappointed murmurs from the investors, the way their faces had shifted from anticipation to disdain. He rubbed his temples, trying to ease the throbbing headache that accompanied a profound sense of regret. The lavish conference room, once a symbol of his success, now felt like a gilded cage. He paced back and forth, his thoughts racing. "Jonathan," a familiar voice called out, breaking through his spiral of self-loathing. It was Emily, her eyes searching for him amidst the wreckage of his ambitions. He turned to face her, and for a moment, he was struck by the contrast between her simplicity and the opulence that surrounded them. Her presence, grounded and authentic, reminded him of the love they had built together, a love he had nearly forsaken. "Emily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I," she replied, her tone measured, betraying a mix of concern and disappointment. "I sensed something was wrong. When I heard about the meeting, I had to come." Jonathan felt a wave of shame wash over him. "I shouldn't have brought Sophia. I thought." He hesitated, the words hanging in the air, heavy with meaning. "I thought it would impress the investors." Emily stepped closer, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Impress them? By hiding me away? You've always said family comes first, yet you chose to leave me out of your life at the most important moment." "I thought," Jonathan began again, but the words felt inadequate. He had spent so long trying to distance himself from their humble beginnings, to prove that he belonged in the world of wealth and power. In doing so, he had lost sight of what truly mattered. "Jonathan, you need to understand something," Emily said, her voice steady despite her hurt. "It's not the money or the status that defines us. It's the love we share, the journey we've been through together. You seem to have forgotten that." He looked in her eyes, searching for the warmth that once filled their home. "You're right, Emily. I let my insecurities get the best of me. I thought I could play the game better than anyone else. I was wrong." There was a long pause as Emily studied him, her expression softening. "We all make mistakes, Jonathan. But how you choose to move forward now matters more than anything." Just then, Marcus entered the room, his presence commanding yet cautious. He had watched the exchange between Jonathan and Emily from a distance, intrigued and impressed by their vulnerability. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, his tone neutral. Jonathan straightened himself, wiping his palms on his tailored pants. "Not at all. I was just reflecting." "Good," Marcus replied, crossing his arms. "Because reflection is necessary. I've seen the way you've treated Emily, and frankly, it's been disheartening." Jonathan felt a surge of defensiveness, but knew better than to lash out. "I realize that now. I've been a fool." Marcus nodded slowly, considering Jonathan's words. "You're not entirely lost, Jonathan. I believe there's still potential for redemption. But you need to take responsibility for your choices, publicly." "Publicly?" Jonathan echoed, bewildered. "You want me to do what?" "You owe Emily an apology, and it needs to be sincere," Marcus stated firmly. "This is not just about your business. It's about your integrity. If you can't acknowledge the person who stood by you through thick and thin, then what does that say about you? Jonathan felt a knot in his stomach as he contemplated the implications of Marcus's words. He had spent so long trying to prove himself to the world that he had neglected the very person who had always believed in him. "You're right. I'll do it." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "Then let's make it happen. A press conference where you can both address the investors and the public. Show them the real Jonathan Parker." As Jonathan nodded, a wave of determination washed over him. He turned to Emily, who was watching him with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "Will you stand by me, Em? I want to make this right." Emily took a deep breath, her heart swelling with a mix of love and apprehension. "I will. But you have to mean it, Jonathan. This isn't just for show." The day of the press conference arrived, and Jonathan stood before a sea of cameras and reporters, his heart racing. He felt Emily's presence beside him, a steady force grounding him in the storm of public scrutiny. As he took the microphone, he glanced at her, and the warmth in her eyes gave him the strength he needed. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "Today, I stand before you not just as a businessman, but as a man who has made grave mistakes. I've let my insecurities and ambitions cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I've hurt the one person who has always been there for me, my wife, Emily." The crowd murmured, their interest piqued. Jonathan could feel the weight of their gazes upon him, but he pressed on. "I've tried to hide her away, thinking it would elevate my status. But I see now that true success is not measured by wealth or appearances. It's measured by love and loyalty. Emily embodies everything I've lost sight of, and for that, I am profoundly sorry." He turned to Emily, who held his gaze, her heart swelling with pride and love. "Emily, you deserve better than what I've given you. Your strength, your kindness, and your unwavering support have been my greatest assets. I promise to honor you and our journey together from this moment forward." The room fell silent, the sincerity of his words resonating with the audience. Jonathan could see the shift in their expressions, curiosity replaced by empathy. He continued, "I understand that trust is earned, and I am committed to rebuilding it, not only with my wife, but with each of you. I am thankful for your patience as I navigate this journey of redemption." As he concluded, a ripple of applause broke out, catching him off guard. It was a sound he had not expected, a sound that echoed with hope and second chances. He felt Emily's hand squeeze his, and in that simple gesture, he found reassurance. In the days that followed, the public response was overwhelmingly positive. Jonathan's admission of fault and his acknowledgement of Emily's role in his life resonated deeply with people. They began to see him not just as a businessman, but as a man striving to correct his mistakes. However, amid this newfound support, a shadow loomed in the background. Sophia, embittered by Jonathan's rejection and determined to reclaim her foothold, was plotting her next move. Her intentions had never been genuine, and now, with Jonathan's reputation on the rise, she felt the need to sabotage what he had built. As Jonathan reveled in the warmth of his renewed relationship with Emily, he received an anonymous tip about Sophia's scheming. He learned of her attempts to undermine his business deals, spreading rumors, and trying to sway investors against him. Realizing how close he had come to losing everything, Jonathan confronted Sophia in a public setting where her deception could no longer thrive in the shadows. "You've been sabotaging my business, haven't you?" he accused, his voice steady yet filled with resolve. Sophia's smirk faded as she realized her cover was blown. "You think you can just dismiss me? I was the one who made you feel alive, Jonathan. You need me. No, Sophia, he replied, his voice firm. You're the reason I nearly lost everything I cared about. I've learned that true success comes from love and loyalty, not manipulation. I won't let you stand in my way anymore. With that, Jonathan walked away, leaving Sophia to grapple with her defeat. He felt a burden lift from his shoulders as he stepped back into the light, a light that now shone brighter than ever, fueled by love, loyalty, and the realization of what truly mattered in life.